I'd like to call the meeting of the Narragansett Regional School Committee to order, and we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I do want to let everyone know that this meeting is being recorded by NRSD in conjunction with the Templeton Community TV, TCTV, and provided to Templeton and Phillipston Cable Access TV for everyone's viewing pleasure. I would just like to make one statement before we begin. There's been a couple of articles in the newspaper, in the Gardner News, about Templeton's budget. And the one on Monday mentions $100,000 needed for a school police officer. And I wanted to clarify, the school hasn't requested that, and I think it might have been a misquote. I believe there might have been another article today that I just haven't seen. I don't know if it's corrected that or not, but I just wanted to let everybody know if they read that article. It wasn't something we asked for, so if you looked and scratched your head, you would have been correct to do so. If we, in fact, were looking for additional school resource officer support, it would be included in our baseline budget number, because that is something we reimburse the town providing the support to us for. We actually pay for that. So it was a little misleading in the article, and again, none of us obviously were at this meeting because we were all here at our own budget hearing, so I wasn't there, and no one here could support what was said, so hopefully we'll get to the bottom of what they were trying to ask for, but it was not for the school. So with that being said, I'd like to welcome everybody to our final budget hearing for the Narragansett Regional School Committee for our FY20 budget. We will have a regular, the regular procedure will be followed for the budget hearing. We will present our budget, which we'll ask Dr. Kazimant to do on our behalf. The school committee will then have some comments and questions, and we'll have some time for that. Once that's completed, we'll open up our public input period. We do have public input guidelines that we follow. We ask whoever would like to speak to come down front to the microphone, identify themselves and where they're from, and then address any questions or comments to the chair, which is myself. The school committee may or may not choose to respond at the time, but we would welcome any input that the public has. We do like to limit our time frame to 3 minutes, but depending on the discussion, we may let it go on longer depending on what the issues or comments are. At that point, we will go ahead and close the budget hearing and move into our budget action process. We will take some votes if the committee so wishes at that point, and we can hopefully get to a budget that's certified at that point. And one change to this agenda that happened, we will be going into executive session. At the end of this, we will not be coming out into public session. It did not make it onto this agenda because it is a new issue that came up. So we were not able to put it on the agenda before the 48-hour posting time. But I do want everyone to know up front that that will be happening, and we, as I said, will not come out into public session afterwards. So with that being said, I would like to officially open the budget hearing and ask Dr. Kazimant to take it from here and present.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. So we're going to, I think I've done this so many times, we could almost do it without doing it. So, clearly, we have a budget, expectations, and the partnership with the community stakeholders is obviously very, very important to us. And we hope to provide a caring learning environment that supports relevant comprehensive student-centered learning opportunities and committed to developing a healthy academic and social emotional foundation for students. What I'm hopeful is that by the end, that shines through. That is very apparent as we talk about the budget. So we set some goals for the FY20 budget. We want to create a budget that's adequate, supports all students, programs, and promotes continuous learning and social emotional growth. To be equitable to both elementary schools, we talked about, and to continue to improve the academic standing. So overall, the state of the district, hey, we have a new elementary school being built. It's true. say those two words together. The number of students that attend NRSD has been consistent. We'll talk about that. Strong emphasis on culture and building and growth mindset at all schools. We've increased district-wide consistency of curriculum, mathematics, and literacy. That, interestingly, will bear out as we talk about programming studies and the things that we have coming in the next year or so. Support for struggling students through a systematic education, which rings true throughout our budget process. Continued emphasis on social emotional learning, which we talked a lot about and we're very focused on. And we're well positioned for a strategic planning process to be engaged by 2020. So with that said, we start talking about enrollment because students are our business and how many we have of them dictate quite a bit. And so when we took a snapshot of our district, which was October 1st, thereabouts, we were at 1,428 students. We are right around 1,426 as I sit here today. Those numbers change, I joke, daily, but at times it's daily. Couple in, couple out, couple in, couple out. We basically balance out, but we've been around 1,420 the past couple of years. When we look at what enrollment will look like and where they'll be next year, and this is all projected, you start seeing some pretty stark differences. So you see Phillipston Memorial Elementary School around 111, Templeton Center, which will be taking students from all middle school, Phillipston, of course, DBS, be around 622 projected. The middle school will see a drop in a grade because the 5th grade will be at the new Templeton Center and one classroom will be at Phillipston. And the high school, very unaffected by the whole reconfiguration anyway, in terms of teachers or students moving. So if you all told, given what we usually take in terms of pre-K students, we look to be projecting about 1,423, which is right on where we want to be. Foundation enrollment versus student enrollment. I always say that when we start looking at foundation enrollment, we're talking about how the state is funding us. That's a very important number, because that number basically gets multiplied by our foundation per pupil amount. And you can see a pretty steady decline from 2009 to about 2015, where it basically levels out. That is very consistent across this area, maybe with the one exception very recently with Ashburnham and Westminster. They've seen quite a growth spurt, so to speak, in terms of homes. They've seen their numbers increase a little bit. Why this number is important is because that represents all the school-age children in Phillipston and Templeton that attend a public school, regardless if it's here or someplace else, whether it be a public charter or a school choice student, whether they're here. That represents the number of school-age children, and that is our foundation enrollment. School student enrollment is pretty darn important as well, because those are the kids that are actually sitting in front of us every single day. And that number generally fluctuates with, obviously, kids moving in and out of the district. And that number is instantly, when a kid moves in, that number automatically goes up immediately. Foundation is 2 FYs in the regions, because in FY17 is truly the only budget that has been, it's in the can, so to speak. FY18 just got closed, you're already in FY19, so FY17, so these numbers generally go back that many FY. So that's how many foundation enrolled students we had at that point in time. Student enrollment are kids that are here today, and we have seen a steady increase in that much. We've had move-ins, quite a few move-ins, but also school choice is a big part of that. The district enrollment by town, again, this doesn't surprise anyone when we put this slide up. If you look back over the period of say 5 fiscal years or so, you see Templeton, gently rising in terms of the number of students, and Phillipston declining a bit since FY14. Our school choice numbers probably are our largest jump over time. But as you can see, over time, we've we've oscillated, maybe trending up in Templeton, maybe trending down in terms of Phillips in terms of student enrollment. So when we look at school choice and what that does for us, we look at a differential of 109 students, meaning that when you consider how many students preliminarily are school choicing into the district, which is 243 at that snapshot in December, does not become official until June. Again, kids come and go. And 134 kids projected or preliminarily school choice out, which gives us a pupil differential of plus 109 students. That's a very good, no matter where you differential. Because that differential, in terms of how many between the kids who are leaving and coming in school choice, represents money, quite frankly. We take in, again, this is projected, but $1.4 million of school choice in. We will, in essence, pay out, so to speak, $734,000 rounding, which leaves us a net of $704,000. That is a direct. I said this to the two groups I spoke to already. This isn't just supervision. That's something to do with, although I'd love it to be great, right? I could just say this is because of me. It's because of the teachers in this district. Parents do not send their children to school that they are not safe and they're not educated. When people have choice, that's exactly what they have, which means they have access and they have means. They could probably go to a lot of different places. They choose to come here. And that is all, the benefit of having a great staff. So what this chart also, though, indicates is that we're starting to level up. Short of, a lot of students coming, say, back into the district who are school choicing out, we're pretty maxed out in terms of where we could actually add school choice children. And I think, kind of a new in my little repertoire here, but I think that often the middle school and the high school are kind of like, well, why don't they want to come here? What was wrong with the high school? All these hordes of kids don't want to come into. The trend is that people, if they're going to school choice their child, do it early for friends. If nothing else, the earlier your child comes into a district or a school, the more time that they're able to acclimate and become and have friendships, etc. So, as an example, the school committee has not, of course, voted on whether or not accepting school choice children for FY20 yet, but we have been besieged with so many phone calls about inquiring about people school choicing their children. I finally asked Susan just to open up the portal just so folks could apply. And then you've heard this this shtick before, but we tell them, we're not even accepting school choice. We need to understand that the school committee hasn't voted on this. We have a freeze, whatever. 39 total. I'm sorry, 39 total. 21 of them are kindergartners. That is the trend. If you're going to school choice your child, you're going to come in as early as possible, and of course, and go the way of, with your group or your cohort. So I fully expect to see this number plateau. I do. And you could argue even fall by a little bit because you can only take so many and you could always lose as many as you can. Go not to. But I see that to be really starting to top out. So what do we spend school choice monies on? Well, if you follow the book and you are a good business manager and you are a good accountant, you do not spend these type of monies on any type of fixed cost. You utilize these monies on one-time costs, projects, curriculums, etc. You don't want to put salaries and insurance in school choice because, like the stock market, these monies, as I just said, can go up and down. This is outside, if you think about the general ledger of the budget, it's outside the budget. So if school choice were to drop, meaning more kids would leave, we're not anticipating that, we're not prepared for that. These costs that we're looking over my shoulder, many of them have to be paid because they are part of operations. Right? So there are teacher salaries, there are insurances. Could we not, in that kind of case, not buy the 8th grade science textbooks? Of course we could. That's something that we could put off a year. That's not something that is critical to mission, so to speak. But insurance, and of course, the teachers are certainly are, and you get yourself into trouble quite quickly. So and we'll talk about this later in the budget, we've moved some of the teacher salaries out of school choice. But I will tell you that in this area, everyone must use school choice to help balance their budget. That's just how it goes, in order to help defray the difference between what Canada is given and then what is needed. So all in total, we were around $1.1 million worth of expenses in terms of applied to school choice revolving. It's a nice mixture of folks that you allow me to say that, yeah, sure, we don't want to provide people positions, and we don't want to see insurance, but we're not so heavy in that area in which that's the only thing. So as we propose our budget of $20,383,102, that proposal is a 9.15 increase from 2019. It maintains level services and addresses required targeted needs. Level service has changed, and we'll talk about that, but the level service has changed because of how we now configure our buildings and where our kids now are educated. This budget maintains optimum class sizes in buildings, and the district's focus on continuous improvement, because that's what we do. We're a school district, and that is our mission. So when you start looking at internal expenditures or increase, we're looking at about $1.7 million increase to these things. Across the board, you look at the state codes, that's how they, these end-of-year reports, etc. These are how these categories break down. You'll see district leadership and administration up by 14.89%. Up, and Nan, do you want to just talk a little bit about what each of the state code, well, I think there's the water in there, each represent?
So you can see that each line has a number next to it. So each one of those, like the 1,000, that according to the state is administrative. Everything that starts with a 2 in the 2000 series, that's instructional. Anything to do with textbooks, teachers, principals, anything that is used for instruction is a 2. 3,000 is where you capture your transportation, your nursing, it's your other school services, like graduation requirements, athletics, other services that are important, but they're not instructional. Obviously, the 4,000 is pretty self-explanatory with the operation and maintenance of the district. Fixed charges, that's all your benefits, your insurances, your health insurance, your Medicaid, your lease on equipment, and then 7,000 is when you acquire new equipment. You see, we don't do that very much. And then 8 is all of your debt, like debt for the biomass boiler, the debt that was for this building, which is falling off in FY20, is all housed in the 8,000. And then 9,000 is where all your tuitions are. That's where your school choice expenses for your kids that go out of district. It's your special ed tuitions for your private schools that they go to and the collaborative. So all of those different numbers are matched up with the end of the year report that we have to report every year to the state, and everything that we talk to the state, we talk those numbers, and it's all broken down into one of those categories, which makes up the whole budget.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So when you look at it in terms of the pie chart, our instructional services, which should not come as a surprise, is over 50% of the general fund increase. We are staff intensive. We're a school. I've said it too many times, but we're little bigots, so we can't automate. So we are, we're dependent on the people, a number of people in order to do our job. So in every pie chart in the world, probably the middle school is the area that's going to see the largest either increase or just chart. So when we start talking about the costs associated with this reorganization, which really started the conversation a little bit last year, we struggled with how to show this, because there were some things that we had that we were going to need to increase, and there were some things that we didn't have that we're just going to literally just have to add. It'd be a brand new something. And as I explained it, it's like a thing at times. It was just really kind of a different way. So hopefully this is a better, without really getting into it quite yet, but we looked at positions and you know, our costs in terms of utilities. So school guidance counselor for Phillipson, well, we don't have one there, so that would be an additional cost from before. I mean, I think we can look at it pretty simply. So when you look at the additional cost, it would be a $340,000 increase. Much of this, well, not much, a lot of it came from, you know, utilities, because those are going to go up quite a bit. That became obviously a focus of, you know, of attention. We had to try to figure out a way to best project. This is not unlike buying a new house. It's a lot bigger, but you never know what your utilities are going to be until you actually move in. So what we tried to do at first, SMMA, which is the company that does all of the work around planning, etc. They have a model in which they run the building our size or that size, and they give you an estimate. Well, as you can see, it was 140, 150 with a 30% contingency, and they didn't add water or sewer, which just for us was just not tight enough. So we created what we think is pretty snazzy, but 45% estimate model. We look at the floor plans in the space that the new Templeton Elementary School is roughly about 45% of the size, right? And so we then took 45% of each of the bills, major bills from this complex, and we figured out that when you do that, you come up to roughly $200,000. Well, if you look at it and you say that's our estimate of $200,000, and you look at their estimate with 30% contingency with no water or sewer, I bet you we're pretty darn close. I think that we've kind of hit upon something that, you know, I think will bear pretty true. But we won't know until we actually live it. And you're also talking about two buildings that were over 100 years old, so it's hard to take those costs and really apply them accurately. So much of the cost was priority staff, right? We're staffing, which is the new level service. So we knew at the beginning of this year what the openings were going to be. And we knew what we needed. We didn't know that last year because people moved, people changed, things changed. So what we knew, and in the conversations of last year, equity is key between the two elementaries, which is part of our goals. So we know that with all the moves happening, that Phillipson was going to require special education teachers. Well, instead of just going out and hiring a person off the street, so to speak, we reassigned an existing staff member to do that, which the cost to the district for in that particular case would be zero. The school psychologist, okay, was an interesting conversation because we know that we need to apply guidance services down there to be equitable. Well, there are only going to be about roughly 100 kids. It's not going to take a whole lot of time to do, or they won't be, say, as busy as maybe two guidance counselors with 600 kids. So we decided to go with the school psychologist because it's about the same amount of money, but it's billable to Medicaid. So when the school psychologist is doing billable service, they are billing about $45 every 15 minutes. Now, not every second of their day is billable, but at least it's recouping some, maybe potentially, monies on their salary to offset that. So we actually utilize the Medicaid money that we project coming in to offset the cost of that position from $70,000, if it's accepted, but to about $35,000 split. Food service, maintenance, and custodial. Well, we know that those are the positions that we needed to add to a new building. Food service doesn't cost us anything because food service is self-supported. So there would be no cost to that. Maintenance and the custodian, it's pretty standard. By contract, that's what we would see. And that would be a cost to the district. That would be an additional cost, so to speak. During our coordinated program review that dealt with special education and civil rights, we learned very quickly that we needed an ELL teacher, although we did not have more than 2 ELL students in the district. When we approach the department head about that, they don't care. You must have one, and you need one like today, so to speak. So when faced with that, we took an existing position, and we combined it, actually serving 2 needs. It's a SPED team chair, which handles all special education needs, all the paperwork and parent contact, and will be the ELL teacher. So that we thought was a pretty good win, so to speak. We know that we need a board-certified behavioral analysis at the elementary level. That is an add. Medicaid coordinator, when we're talking about Medicaid, we'll talk about Medicaid. We've increased Medicaid, we've almost tripled the amount that we received, say 10 years ago or 8 years ago. We want a person to head that up. There's a lot of paperwork to that. And by the way, that job is billable. So the job that they're actually going to do to make us more money, is going to be billed right back to make us more money, which we love. The Spanish teacher, we need to add a foreign language to our middle school folks. We need that. Almost every middle school has this, and we are preventing our kids from taking Spanish 5, I believe, is the end of the road, because they cannot take it in middle school. We cannot allow that to continue, because foreign language is a big piece of going to college. And 504 para is, we have a lot of 504s which are like IEPs, they are not IEPs, but they require to be monitored, and there are services provided in that portion too. So I've really given you the positions and why they need to be quite frank. The school psychologists need for testing and all those other, all very important pieces of what we do. The ELL and the ECBA, we talked about it in our discussion. Okay, so what's driving the budget? Well, salaries, right? Salaries. 7.95% included a 1% cost of living allowance for most employees. New positions included the school psychologist that we talked about, Medicaid coordinator, BCBA, and slash special needs teacher, Spanish teacher in 504, and custodian English work. The employee benefits, so it went up roughly about 10%. And it's gone up 10% or so the last couple of years, or very close to it. Transportation went up 12%. And our special education transportation increased by $60,000. Sometimes transportation is almost as expensive as the actual program itself. Student services in terms of out of district or tuition on resident, it decreased by $4,000. Special education out of district increased by $119,000. That's amazing. Usually the way we see it being positive by tomorrow. If someone were to move in tomorrow that's in and out of placement district, we would incur that cost. So it's very fluid, but we work very hard to keep our kids being here. Building and grounds, we look, you see approximately $200,000 increase in utilities to bring Templeton online. The $6,000 increase school resource office requirement, and the $25,000 decrease in electricity from the school changing light bulbs. We haven't finished changing all the light bulbs, but they're working on it. We have seen $25,000 already. We haven't changed out all the light bulbs, and we got those light bulbs at it was a deal, and I forget now, but it would have been $8,000 or something to that effect, and it cost us not even half that. So it certainly makes money. Technology, we do a nice job with technology. We are one of the most advanced districts in terms of this, and that's a very big part of what we do. And our textbooks and instructional supplies basically stay level funded. So you look at the big numbers, you look at salary costs. You're looking at an increase of about $893,000. Okay. 202 staff at FY20 as we see current, and proposed at 209, which is the new level service. Okay. Our revenues, there's not 3 pages of this, but basically the state aid has increased $25,000 by giving us $20 a student. Regional transportation increased by $35,000, which is level. And of course, this is all the rage at the state level. That's the type of thing that we're trying to increase, or at least give us what they promised us way back, which was 100%. Our local assessment, that obviously it went up $214,000, requested an additional $988,000 because of transportation, et cetera, which was quite a bit of increase. Phillipson's increase, smaller because our pie is a little bit smaller, but it'll be increased by $56,000, rounding, and an additional $187,000 overall. Transportation would be $12,000. So what you're looking at is that, you know, the required minimums that the state set and what we need went up quite a bit. And of course, local assessments, evaluations, et cetera, also played a part into some of the conversation. So when you look at all this, you quickly see that our expenses outweigh the anticipated revenue. But one of the things we want to talk about in terms of E&D, so what have we done? So I'm going to say the comment that I say all the time when I did my interviews, my first transition to this district, the school was identified as a place that was just not with their hand out and not a good community partner, not looking to help the situation, just always looking for money, quote unquote. Took that very seriously when I came aboard, and so we started looking at some ways to increase quote unquote revenue, which we'll talk about. The E&D balance and the usages are about one of the areas that have gone up quite a bit, and we actually received some criticism, I think it was either last year or the year before, in terms of, if we're giving you all this money, why aren't you spending it? Well, that's not the case. We are spending it. What's happening is that the Medicaid money comes in at the end of the month, and we're now billing so well for these services that that money comes right into E&D. Okay, excess and deficiency. All right, so we are excess $635,000 FY18, and I think close to probably 300,000 of that or thereabouts, or maybe more than that, was exactly Medicaid. And so that, the way we have to use E&D, quite frankly, is to help meet the bottom line, which benefits obviously the community and towns. Medicaid reimbursement, we've already talked about how that increased. We don't have to do anything and we'll receive something. Medicaid is currently reimbursed on the students who have who are on IEPs and who meet the criteria for Medicaid. And so there's a lot of legwork behind that, a lot of work. So we decided to do a lot of work. And so since roughly, well, let's call it FY15, we've gone up, almost double. We're anticipating somewhere in the area of $400,000 this FY19. That's a lot of money, quite frankly. And for a little bit of work, a lot of work, it also offsets whatever the distances between what we receive and what we need. So how have we done this? And I said this to the teachers today when I met with them middle school and high school. You'll hear very little from me, bell ringing about central office or whatever we do. It's not what this is about. But I will show this because this is a direct result of a lot of hard work. Certainly, Marie, right, Cheryl, who works on special education, does a lot of Medicaid, and Kate Cleese, who writes all the competitive grants, or many of them in Johnson Office as well, is that in FY15, as I'm coming in, if you allow me to use the word revenue for monies that we can affect to increase, we're making about $170,000. Well, FY19 projected is $1.2 million. Remember, school choice, that's all teachers. Love to take credit for that, but that's the quality of the teachers. Medicaid, it's a lot of hard work. We're trying to figure it out. Competitive grants, Kate and company. So that's money that wouldn't normally, you wouldn't normally be counting on, but that we were able to work very hard to get that. And so that is how we've helped the community fund this district. So when we start looking at the proposed operating budget, folks, and we can go through, we've already actually gone through this all. We start looking at a $1.1 million budget shortfall. And when you look at it and how it breaks down, again, it shouldn't come to any surprise. You'll think about 47% of that is contractual obligations or fixed charges. Okay, salaries, that kind of thing. The next item is costs associated with the reorganization. That's $340,000 that if this was a year that the school wasn't going to come online, we may or may not see. We would see some because we need the position, but we wouldn't see the entire thing. And so, again, we've gone over how that looks, but it looks like to be anticipating a revenue increase of about 9.5. Again, we've kind of not skipped, we've already worked on all of these type of things at this point. So what I want to hope is, as I've kind of flown through this, but the budget is a moral document. What we've asked for, what we've identified as need, we've identified, the need through the fact that we need to do this to help our students. And that, in fact, is hopefully what you heard today. So,
Anyone on the school committee have any comments or questions or statements to make? I would just first like to thank Dr. Casavant and Ms. Geister for all the work put into coming up with these numbers, putting the presentation together, and having everything laid out clearly. This has been an interesting budget process. We met as a full committee instead of a subcommittee, so we've all been in the weeds with you, I think much to your chagrin at times, but I think I feel like I really understand all the ins and outs and can speak to it. So I want to just thank you to that and thank the rest of the committee as well for all the input along the way to get us here to come up with a number that I'm confident represents what we need for students in this district, not just today, but positioning us to move the district forward and continue the improvements. I think you spoke of continuous improvement before, and I get very excited hearing all of the things that we're doing and looking at the impact that we'll be able to make on the students as they move forward, especially with all the changing environment in the world today that our children will have to compete with. So we have to stay ready for that. I know we keep saying social and emotional. It was interesting, I just read an article, is we need to stop saying that. It's mental health. It is mental health. And, I've gotten asked, and I've asked my own questions over the years, just how critical these services are for our children. And I think that this budget supports all of that holistically. No student, no person can learn when they're not safe. And we need all of these supports. So my position is this is definitely a budget that positions us where we need to be and includes those services. It's not extravagant. There are other things that were asked for that we heard that the administration said that they really wanted, but this gets our critical needs as a baseline.
Yes.
Any other comments?
I just want to say, that I agree with everything you say. I just again want to thank everybody in the team for throughout this process. We really asked you guys to do a whole bunch of scenarios and put numbers in and take numbers out and do a bunch of work here, just so that we could get to the point where we are. And I really appreciate that.
Okay, if there's no other school committee comments, I would entertain any public input. So if there's anyone in the public who'd like to come down, if you want to come down and introduce yourself. If you wouldn't mind, if you would introduce yourself, only because we have the camera there, so we would like to have you.
I have some questions.
Sure, absolutely, come on down.
I want to be on there.
Yes, introduce yourself first.
All right, Jared Van Dryer Phillipson. I have some questions. I know in the past, Templeton worked to rather take money and put it into the school. They took the money and to pay down the tax rate, or to reduce the tax rate, which caused the town to be behind on a bunch of numbers. For quite some time, according to the mass redistribution formula that nobody could figure out, the numbers that were coming up and compared to Templeton's taxable rate, the state was subsidizing the Narragansett Regional School District until the tax rate caught up to that amount. And I don't see those numbers here at all. So I'm wondering if part of this large increase to Templeton is maybe part of what those numbers are trying to catch up, because the state keeps reducing the amount that they're subsidizing, trying to get Templeton to come up to the right numbers. So I'd like to know at what point Templeton is in catching up to the numbers that they are supposed to be at compared to where they are or have been at.
I will do my best to try and answer you, because I don't think anyone here has an answer, because the state does things, I think you spoke correctly, the formula is one that is well beyond, I think, all of our brain power here to understand. What I do know, though, in looking back over the trend over the past several years, Templeton actually, I believe it was last year, Ms. Geister, met the target that the state had. So they did meet their minimum contribution. What happened this year, though, is the state has new equalized values that they put out, plus they use the new income statistics. So every community was faced with a new look at what their contribution should be. And the state continues to push all communities to add more to the pie, and I'm not going to get into my personal views on that because it's not right, but that's what they did. So if you look, it's not just Templeton who had a significant increase. Phillipston as well had, so we also in Phillipston, I say we because I'm in Phillipston, also saw an increase in what our required minimum contribution, even though we've been over effort according to the state formula. So it was an interesting paradigm this year. So I can't really speak to future because I don't know what the state is going to come up with. There's a lot of chatter about things and changes. So I don't think we really have a good answer for you. But they are meeting the contribution that whatever the state has set, that is what they've been meeting.
So the state is no longer subsidizing part of your...
No.
Okay. Just a statement, but wasn't it when the state requested the towns to regionalize that they promised 100% reimbursement of the transportation costs?
Yes, there was. So this is interesting. It was written as a statute, and the statute always had in it subject to appropriation. Back in November of 2017, the Mass Municipal Modernization Act went into effect. And not only does it say subject to appropriation once in the statute, it actually says it twice. Somehow it got past the copy editors. There's been a lot of discussion at the state level. They actually, in this prior year's legislation, enacted legislation to form a transportation committee to look at holistically the problems of school transportation statewide. So the committee's been formed. From what I understand, and I heard last week, there'll be, I believe it was 6 hearings that'll be set throughout the year as this committee comes together and looks at various issues. Competition, we go out to bid and we have one bid returned. And it's not just us, it's most every district. It doesn't matter where in the state you go, it's the same thing. Who's eligible to take a piece of the reimbursement pie from the regional bucket? Should urbans be included in there? Should the vocational? So there's all of these pieces, and they are looking at coming up with some sort of legislative reform. One of the things that several of the groups are just looking for is a number that would be consistent. So if you can't give us 100, can you commit to maybe a floor of 85? And hopefully more, but if you can commit, then at least we can budget. So that's where the transportation stands, because yes, why regionalize if you can't get the benefits of regionalization that the state promised you? So.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you. Anyone else? Okay, seeing no other further public input, we will move on to, we will officially close the budget hearing and move into our budget actions if the committee so chooses. The first thing that I would like to just make note of is we are going to invoke the rule of necessity, that we do have voting members on the committee that receive retiree health insurance benefits. We still need them in order to pass the budget. We need them to vote, and this is per advisory 05-05, the rule of necessity. So I just wanted to make that clear, that we would be doing that. If the committee is so inclined and agree with the presentation of Dr. Casavant and the numbers, I would entertain a motion that we certify, the Narragansett Regional School District School Committee vote and certify the amount of $20,383,102 for the fiscal year 20 budget. I have a motion and I have a second. Is there any discussion on that? Hearing none, I will do a roll call. Mr. Mason?
Aye.
Mrs. Mattson?
Yes.
Mrs. Robichaud?
Yes.
Mrs. Kojal?
Yes.
Mrs. Tripolo?
Yes.
Mrs. Chartier?
Yes.
Mr. Marks?
Yes.
And Mrs. Hughes says yes, that was unanimous. The next action I would entertain is a motion based upon the estimated receipts, and that would be that the Narragansett Regional School District School Committee vote that the estimated income of $10,338,544 for fiscal year 20, which is based on the Chapter 70 and 71 aid from the Governor's House 1 budget submission. I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
And I have a second. Any discussion on that? Hearing none. Mr. Mason? Mrs. Mattson? Mrs. Robichaud?
Yes.
Mrs. Kojal?
Yes.
Mrs. Tripolo?
Yes.
Mrs. Chartier?
Yes.
Mr. Marks? And Mrs. Hughes says yes. Yes. Based on those two numbers then, we would vote assessments to the towns. First we'll do Templeton, and I would entertain a motion that the Narragansett Regional School District School Committee vote the assessment to Templeton in the amount of $7,479,406 for fiscal year 20.
So moved.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have several seconds. Any discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Mason?
Aye.
Mrs. Mattson?
Yes.
Mrs. Robichaud?
Yes.
Mrs. Kojal?
Yes.
Mrs. Tripolo?
Yes.
Mrs. Chartier?
Yes.
Mr. Marks?
Yes.
And Mrs. Hughes says yes, unanimous. And the assessment vote for Phillipston, I would entertain a motion that the Narragansett Regional School District School Committee vote the assessment to the town of Phillipston in the amount of $1,750,152 for fiscal year 20.
So moved.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
And I have a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Mason?
Aye.
Mrs. Mattson?
Yes.
Mrs. Robichaud?
Yes.
Mrs. Kojal?
Yes.
Mrs. Tripolo?
Yes.
Mrs. Chartier?
Yes.
Mr. Marks?
Yes.
And Mrs. Hughes says yes. The last motion we do not need to make because it's for debt servicing. We have no debt. As Ms. Geister mentioned before, the debt for the school has come off the books, so we do not have any debt that we are assessing back to the towns. And we have a certified budget, so I thank everyone. Let's see. Any comments from the committee at this point? Okay, hearing none, the next meeting that is scheduled is an add to the calendar because we moved the hearing dates. We have added Wednesday, March 20th, which we had discussed prior, at 6 o'clock. We have it scheduled current for the Library Media Center. We're working to make sure that we'll be able to film appropriately, so for now, that's where we've got it scheduled. Yes, Ms. Triplett.
Yes. Excuse me, I think I went over that, now we're at meeting dates when we're asking for comments. We set the superintendent last meeting.
Oh, yes.
We set the superintendent and the business manager with a charge. And that was in the short week that they had to do it. Because of my concern is what do we do if we don't have what we need for money? So we asked, am I correct that we asked them to come back with some
Yes, we
options?
did. Yes, how could we avoid asking? Is there a way we could avoid asking for override monies? And if there was, what does it look like? I believe was...
Right, because that would take into account if we didn't, at the end, have that
Exactly.
money. So I would ask for a report from the superintendent as to what he came up with.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
for remembering that. Again, the week it took most of that to just prepare, but in short, to answer the big question, is there a plan that could negate the need for additional appropriation, whatever you want to call it? And as far as that we can see, no. What I would say though is that there are ways, there may be a couple ways, but there is one of the ways in order to mitigate such a large amount to either town, quite frankly, is that you would have to consolidate classrooms. So in order, if you are $1 million, I'm just going to round from there. So if you're $1 million short, if you remember, I talked quite a bit about being staff intensive. That's what we are. So 51% of our budget is nothing more. It's something to do with salary, etc. So the only way to cut such an amount of money, so to speak, would be to consolidate or to get rid of extra, which is, I don't mean to smile. We do not have people just lying about an extra. You would have to probably, honestly, consolidate the elementary classrooms. That's what you would have to do. Even with that, and by the way, so I can be clear, we can only go in one direction, so to speak. There's only space enough in one place, which would be something, again, that's where it would have to go. It would still be $592,265 short of the total amount. So if you think about that, because what we would realize after, because the company would be all like that, if, for example, you have $950,000 of the salary down at, say, at Doveton, the bumping process doesn't get you $950,000. If you're sitting there and you've been reducing force, you have bumping rights, and so if you're making a lot, say 70,000, you're probably going to bump somebody who's making a lot less. So it's not an equal swap, so to speak. So if that's the question, then and there are other things, obviously, that would go into that. There would be probably, again, we were talking about, we really could not find a position that's current that we could do without, and we were trying to really look at that. We could not, because every teacher is doing something. We're not doing anything extra by any stretch of the imagination. So that shouldn't come as a surprise, because you'd have to consolidate staff. You would have to consolidate classrooms, and that would be the option if all of a sudden, as you said, no money came forward and you're still sitting at X. That would be, I guess, what I would say is step one, and then you'd have to find, of course, the additional, and which would be such a number that you wouldn't have enough to teach. You wouldn't have enough to do pretty much anything, so to speak. So you'd be able to mitigate or to reduce pain of such a large override, but you wouldn't be able to absolutely do without one.
Just so in your quick model estimation, and granted, these are rough numbers, and we'll emphasize that, even consolidating classrooms, instead of asking for $1 million, we're still asking for $600,000.
Roughly, yes.
So it's not, and we're looking at class sizes roughly of.
So we actually were able to again look at that a little bit. Again, what's the unknown, of course, is kindergarten. Something like that. You don't know what you have. You don't know until you.
Some day times the first day of school.
Right? So I think that if you just give me 1 second, I was trying to, I wasn't sure if it would back to it, but the idea is that if, you are looking at a projected, let's look at it this way. If you look at current students that goes from K through 4, we talked about this before, right now, I can tell you, right now, there are 59 students from Phillips, there are 10 students from Templeton, there are 24 school choice children, and that's a total of 93. Now, there's more than that, because if you add in the pre-K, then there's 7 more, and it's 160. So, you know, automatically what you do is you have to take those numbers and say, okay, well, how many are third graders and how many are fourth graders? And then you take that and you would divide it by 4 classrooms, et cetera. So it would be different depending on the number of kids to be divided.
But we're looking at roughly like 30 kids in a
Well,
classroom,
yeah,
is that?
so you would, not in every group, to be fair, right? Because I don't want to give this blanket, you know, statement, so to speak, but you'd be looking, for example, you know, an average of like 27 in grade 2, you'd have an average of about 28 in grade 3. Grade 4 is one of our largest, you'd have around 29-ish, so to speak, and your, well, the average, right? So, but
28.
right,
29.
you'd be anywhere between 27 and 29, right? And that's not, again, that's not factoring in kindergarten, because you'd have to be very careful of just, you'd have to kind of keep them, because the numbers become so high in terms of how they come in. We project that out. We know how many via census are eligible for pre-K or K, or we do that kind of work. So is it unheard of? No, we're not talking about 30s and 40s, for God's sakes, but they would be high. Yes.
Can I just say, in that scenario, okay,
Yeah.
would the school choice would we consolidate the school choice children as well? It's all, okay.
You have to, when I say you have to keep them, that sounds awful. But my question to the state was, well, if you had reasoning like this, what happens to that, you know, part of the, you'd accept them, so you accept them
Yeah, till they leave.
yeah.
Okay.
So even if we close,
For better or for worse, I'll
yeah,
try
so
to
even
make
if
it
we
fair.
this year decided to close school choice and not be a school choice school, we're still committed to keep
Absolutely.
those that we've already taken in, which
Absolutely.
is right. I mean, that's the
Yeah,
right to
you've
do.
committed to
but-
them, they've committed to you,
Yeah.
you've made an agreement, so to speak, so. I did check that, because I had no idea.
So you're saying you could get 4 positions that you would RIF, then that would reduce, that would be a K1.
Yeah, it would be
That would be a 1, 2, 3, 4.
5.
Didn't we just add a teacher in 5?
Mhm.
But then
Yes,
that
we
wouldn't
did.
be added.
Well, we just wouldn't, I mean, everybody would say it's, never is. We would just-
So we would have 5 positions.
And then you'd have maintenance and you'd have the cafeteria and the.
They would just move. Right, so those openings, right, we factored that in, so those folks that would be there would cover the openings in that, you know, in that, you know, configuration, right? They go those in the center, so there wouldn't be openings any longer. That kind of thing. You know what I'm saying? So-
But at the end of the day,
Right.
it's either $1 million or $600,000. It's, I mean,
Yes.
it's not, I don't want to say it's not significant, but when you do a risk reward, to me, it's very clear, you know, what, that the budget we've now voted is where we need to be. It's just, there's nowhere, you can't start cutting people willy-nilly and say, go figure it out.
Right, so there's-
Well, that wouldn't be willy-nilly.
Well-
You would be bringing them to,
But to come up with the other 600,000 is what I'm thinking. So
well, if
this is a
the
plan.
town of Templeton paid their transportation, that would give us a start. I mean, it has to be acknowledged that this money that we just put in here is because the override is gone, which we've had every year and counted on.
Yeah, so just as a
That
rough-
part of it wouldn't be 600,000 if it were that, because the school doesn't take all that money.
So you will see an additional appropriation or additional for FY20, for example, in Templeton, okay? It shows $988,335, so it's, you know, right there. Of that, though, just so you know, of that additional appropriation, $167,905, okay, is actually, when I say it's transportation, right? So And by the way, we did the same thing for Phillipston, what you do for one, you do for the other. So when you look at Phillipston underneath there, you see 187,834, and you go, oh, okay, there's that total number, but $31,910 is their percentage of transport. You have to do both, right? You have to do the same. And that way, so yeah, you could, the argument is, although, if it was, yes, it was added into this override because the fear was that it would catastrophically impact one of the other departments in these towns, right? So in other words, it ultimately is the responsibility of the towns to pay the transportation bill. I don't think anyone's arguing that. But that additional money, I hate to say it this way, but rolled into the proposed, I have to say the word override, I don't like to, but I have to, right, that additional appropriation, but only $820,430 on the Templeton side, and only $155,924 on the Phillipston side is to help, is to pay the bills of the district.
So
That's very important.
It is. So in other words, if we didn't ask for any additional funding, the town of Templeton, based upon only giving us 2.5% over last year,
Right.
would have come up $167,905 short.
Right.
That's
That-
without
that is
giving
a
us
lot-
anything
You said
else.
a lot better than I
Yeah.
did, right,
Well-
absolutely. So in order to go 2.5%, it would have drastically, potentially, the catastrophic for some department in either town, so what you do for one, you do for the other, and you figure that out, but yes, that's much.
And I think that's important as we just ratified that budget, because people in town are going to say, what's going on with the school? The question is, what's going on with the school as a department of the town? So that question, and Lori said it last meeting, that the question is not only what's going on with the school, but what's going on with the town. So because that question's already started to be asked. When they see these tapes, they say, what's going on with the schools? They have to understand the town of Templeton doesn't have money to pay its school well. I mean, it paid it on paper, but it took it away. So coming up with those positions was about all we could come up with at this point. So a lot of conversation has to be had still around that number. Not the number we passed, but how we get there.
Get there. Yep.
Okay,
Right.
I have a question. So, say this budget that was certified gets shot down, and they ask us to re-certify a different number. Just
So let's,
for giggles.
yeah, so let's just step through the process first, though, and then you ask your question. So we are going to send this information to the town of Templeton, who is in the process of factoring out their budget. So I know there was a presentation last week, and they've already have some pools of money earmarked for the school. What we ask for, minus what they feel they can fund out of the general fund, they'll come back to us, which they've kind of already done, and said, hey, we'd like you to ask for an override for those monies. So it will go on the town warrant. So that's where it looks like we're headed for step one. Right? So at that point, if that's where this goes, we would go to town meeting. We would have, and then the townspeople will vote and decide if they want to support the school to the amount that is in the override number. If that doesn't pass, at that point, it gets tossed back to the school committee to recertify a number, at which point we will look at the number and decide, do we stand our ground, is this what we submitted? And we've kind of talked through this before. Or do we make adjustments? Did we learn something new in the interim? Maybe the House budget comes out and we can start tweaking some things, maybe not. But then we would recertify. And then that would go back to the towns. At that point, the town has 60 days to call another town meeting to try and get the budget passed again. In this case, it would be perhaps another override. It sounds like any alternative situation is going to put us in an override capacity in some way or another. At that point, if the townspeople don't pass that, then it comes back to the school committee again. Meanwhile, the clock is ticking because the state says if you don't have a certified budget by July 1st, you will go on a 1/12 process. So they look at this current fiscal year, and we get 1/12 of that budget. That's how they fund us, and that's what they require the towns to pay. Because until you come up with a certified number, nobody really knows how much money to give. So in the meantime, okay, so we now have to recertify. And it would go back to, at that point, a joint town meeting with both towns. If we were more towns, all towns in a district get together, it gets presented and voted on. At that point, if it doesn't pass, and the clock is still ticking, and we hit a November, I think it was 1st, 15th, is it 1st? November 1st, the state says, yeah, we're not going to let you go without a budget. That can't happen. You have to have a budget in place by December 31st, so they will come in and they will assist us in determining what our budget should be. And that's where, as I think we've kind of talked about before, things are taken out of our hands and the state will tell us how they think that our budgeting should be, and the towns will then have to fund what that number is. So that is the process. So your question then.
So just say that we opt to consolidate the children to Templeton, and then decide to do an override for whatever amount is left. Is that something that?
Yes, we would recertify for that number at that point. So we could, at any point it gets sent back to us, we could recertify for whatever number we would want to represent. I think last year we had to recertify it. We did recertify. We passed, then we had a meeting with the town, and they asked us to help out by cutting some expenses, so we actually came back and recertified a different number. So we are able to do that. Once the townspeople speak and vote something in, that's your amount of funding. So the problem is without an override passing as the supplemental monies for our budget, we've only got X amount of dollars approved. And if our budget doesn't match what the towns have approved, it's not really certified. Even though the school committee is certified, it's not passed.
Right.
So
My other question is, if that were to happen, what would happen to the Phillipston building? Is that a district building or is that a town building?
it's a town building. So I think that's something that would have to be discussed. I think you were just looking at how you would consolidate.
You were just looking completely at money's like hard.
And that's what you
We
came
have
up
to serve it, becomes a little bit out of our purview, so to speak, we can do that. So, for us.
I would like to believe that as a school committee, we would entertain a public hearing before we did something that drastic, so, no.
Too far.
Yeah.
I do. I just want to say, it's a lot of discussion to take place before that happens, so.
Yeah.
Let's not jump ahead. Let's not jump ahead.
Well, I just want information because we can't talk outside of
You're absolutely correct.
of these meetings. So I just want information so I can.
But I guess I just want to say, I think that, the scenario that was presented is one option, you know what I mean? It is an option, but I think we'd have to look at many other options before we went that way, so.
I don't know if there is any other option.
That's what makes it difficult. And having, for me personally, having touched these numbers as often and as frequently and as many variations as we have, could we save 10,000? Sure, I'll find you 10,000. We're not finding $1 million. That's the problem. You just can't without severely impacting our delivery, and that's not acceptable. That's not what we do here, So, good question though, because. No, we have to go to executive session. And of course, pull my notes out about which executive session we want to go for. All right, any other comments? Or anyone want to say something? Okay, with
So our
that.
next meeting is on the 20th?
The 20th, yes, a regular school committee meeting. on the
We have
20th.
next week off?
We have next week off? So as I announced earlier, we had something come up and we do need to go into executive session tonight. So we certainly apologize for that not getting on the agenda, but under the circumstances, it just came up. So I would entertain a motion to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigating position of the public body, and the chair so declares. So this is for reason number 3. I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second. Oh, and we will not be entering back into public session afterwards. My apologies. Make that clear. I have a motion and I have a second. Roll call, Mr. Mason.
Aye.
Mrs. Mattson. Mrs. Robichaud.
Yes.
Mrs.
Yes.
Kojal, Mrs. Triplowitz,
Yes.
Mrs. Chartier, Mr. Marks, and Mrs. Hughes says yes. So I thank
Chair.
everyone. Yeah.
I just wanted to say, I could not get it to work. I'm sorry, I tried to hit you in flow, so. The target local share is what I believe John was speaking about.
Yes.
Let me say something for the record, though. I understand, and it is at times confusing. Templeton never did not pay what they were either supposed to, or matter of fact, they paid more. And when we asked for more, they gave more. They actually had to pay double more. So I don't mean, and I'm certainly not making light of this, but I presented this actually to the finance committee a couple of years ago. And it became this real point of contention. If you remember, like you haven't held up your end of the bargain. There was this conversation, and I went, wait a minute, we're really talking about two different things. Maybe at some point they were below, I'm going to use the word effort, because it can be used in a couple of different ways, okay? But here, okay, so the state imposed that. The state, no one even had a, they just taxed it on top of whatever else the town of Templeton gave. They always gave the minimum, at least, of course, that's of course statute, and when there was more to be given, they gave. I remember my first year here, they gave that, and this. So I had to say that out loud, because that was, again, a big topic of conversation 2 years ago.
And at the district reorganization committee, a lot of this scenario came up too.
Yes, so I always keep this slide in my back pocket.
No, that's
And I couldn't
great,
find
thank
it.
you, because that graphically
Right,
does display,
right,
I
exactly.
think, to answer Mr. Fernandez's question that, you see that Templeton, what the state requires, they are at effort.
It was applied to their tier sheet. I'm sure that's the mechanism, they just applied it. It wasn't, they had no say in it one way or another, so I just want to make sure. Sorry.
Okay. So anyway, we have actually voted, and we will be moving into executive session. So I thank everyone for coming. I thank the public comment. And if anyone has additional questions or comments or concerns, Dr. Cazavan is more than happy to answer any and all calls and questions. Or obviously your local representative. So thank you.